there is a complicity in the president's hatred that undermines the goodness and the decency of Americans, regardless of what party.
He is a racist, and he stokes racism in this country.
Look, and it gives me no pleasure to say this, but I think all of the evidence out there suggests that we have a president who is a racist.
Welcome back. Those were some of the 2020 presidential candidates on the Democratic side who say that President Trump is at least partially complicit in Saturday's shooting in El Paso. With me now, another 2020 hopeful, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. Mr. Mayor, thanks for being on the program today. Let's start right there. Does the president bear responsibility for what happened in El Paso?
Yeah, and the facts are pretty clear. We did not have this racially or ethnically or religiously motivated violence as a regular feature of our national life just a few years ago. He's the X factor. He normalized it. He made it. He gave permission. And it's got to stop. It's obvious when the voice that's supposed to be the paternal voice or the maternal voice in the country, the voice that's supposed to set the tone for the whole country, encourages division and hate, starting with his first press conference when he came down that escalator and attacked Mexicans.
We did see this beginning under the Obama administration. I mean, I remember President Obama's way of leading after something like this happened was to go down to Charleston and sing Amazing Grace with the people at the Emanuel AME Church. What I am interested in knowing is what is the difference in your view between that and how you handle it in that way and how this president is handling these things, and what does it mean? Does it mean that we are encouraging these people to do more of this?
Yeah, Casey, I don't think he's handling. I think from time to time he reads a script to allow him to say something. He did something, he said something appropriate. But the messaging from the beginning has been overtly divisive, and it's ramped up in recent weeks. So when I see these attacks, white supremacy tragically unites so much of America. It is aimed at Muslims and Jews. It's aimed at the LGBT community. It's aimed at black people, Latino people, Asian people, immigrants. It's a vast majority of America under attack. And that's one of the things I think is going to wake people up. It doesn't, tragically, it's not exclusive to one part of our country. It's coming for all of us. And he's unleashed those forces in ways we never saw before. So it's not what he says when he's pretending to address the issue. It's what he says every day. It's the constant attack on people of color in particular.
Is that what you think we saw this morning, him pretending?
Oh, yeah. That wasn't real. That wasn't real. You can't attack a parade of leaders of color. You can't attack Mexicans the first day of your campaign and then pretend that you're trying to unify or you haven't been the cause of the problem. He's the X factor. It's not us. We don't have to be this way as a country. I actually think the American people, you're seeing more and more Americans who want to get along. You're seeing a generation coming up that's actually free of a lot of the biases of the past. I don't think this is who we have to be. But so long as he's around, he is fomenting these forces.
Do you think President Trump is a white nationalist?
In his own way, sure. Sure, because look at what he does. He celebrates white culture to the exclusion of all other cultures, and he consistently suggests that people of color in particular are harming this nation when there's so many of the people who built this nation. So we're so shocked by it. We've never had this phenomenon. We've seen times in our country where we've gone astray. And I mentioned to you earlier, the McCarthy period is an example where a lot of leaders sent the wrong message and started to turn this country into something it wasn't. And then finally, more and more voices of conscience spoke up, and we corrected ourselves after a few years. It's not the first time in our history that we've started to see leaders take us down a dangerous and divisive road. But it's got to be Democrats, Republicans, independents. It's got to be faith leaders. We have to break out of this spiral. And we have to defeat, I believe, really practically, we have to defeat Trump as part of it. But even beyond that, you could defeat Trump but not defeat Trumpism. The forces that got unleashed, as we've seen down through history, as we're seeing all over Europe right now, whatever frustrations built up, they've been very, very cynically tapped into by these white nationalist forces. Maybe it's honest economic frustration. Maybe it's people who are given the wrong idea of how things happen to them. But they've been cynically manipulated. You don't address that passively. You have to address that actively. And that's going to take leaders of all types stepping forward to end this era.
Law enforcement officials in New York City have in many ways led the way for our country in fighting against terrorism.
Yes.
But the focus in the last couple decades has really been, for obvious reasons, international terrorism. And there is now a struggle to try and apply that to domestic terrorism. What have you learned as mayor that you think we should apply nationally in that fight?
Casey, it's actually a hopeful story because we found that we could get closer to communities. Our police could build stronger bonds with communities. A lot of information would start to flow. A lot of times you've heard those kinds of terrorist attacks that you're talking about, the ones we've seen over decades, stopped because community members came forward to the police. And that bond, that communication makes all the difference. It's true with white nationalism as well. There will be people at the community level who have a sense that someone's going in the right direction, someone intends harm. There'll be family members, there'll be people at work who see something wrong. We've got to create a culture where they come forward. If you see something, say something, but also a deep bond between law enforcement and communities. I can tell you, we're the biggest city in the nation, the most diverse place on earth. We actually found a way to do it. And it saved a lot of lives. We've got to do it all over the country now.
And do you have confidence that all of the institutions that need to actually work together to solve this problem are capable of doing it? I mean, we need the social media companies. There have been questions about whether they're able to do it. We need our national law enforcement. We need local law enforcement all across the board. We've got a Congress that I think a lot of Americans are frustrated doesn't seem to do very much whenever there's a shooting like this on guns. Are we capable of it?
We're capable of it, but we're not living up to our potential in the least. Law enforcement for a long time has known that domestic terrorism was a tremendous danger. In fact, it was those white nationalist militias that often targeted law enforcement around the country. So they have plenty of painful experience dealing with them. They're more than ready. I think faith leaders are more than ready. I think the social media companies need to up their game right now. They are part of this. Maybe they didn't intend to. But the number one missing piece is the Congress. They should come back right this minute. Pass the basics, background checks, a ban on assault weapons, waiting periods for gun purchase. That's what the American majority wants. And the Congress has a moment. We saw it in Florida after the tragedy of Parkland.
Yeah.
Even Republicans in Florida said, we hear our constituents, we have to do something. The U.S. Congress needs to do the same now.
Yeah, we definitely have seen that ground shifting. All right, Mayor Bill de Blasio, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.